This video is sponsored by Raycon. More about them later. In Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, abilities were introduced as a new attribute for Pokemon that provided every single one of them with some sort of passive. While some abilities are shared between lots of Pokemon, some, given to just one Pokemon or one evolutionary line, have come to be called signature abilities. And I've done the work of compiling every single one of them into this video. Starting in Gen 3, when abilities were introduced, we only have 5 signature abilities that remain signature to this day. Those are Airlock on Rayquaza, Color Change on Kecleon, Forecast on Castform, Pure Power on the Medicham line, and Wonder Guard on Shedinja. Then there are plenty of others, but they get added to other Pokemon later in the franchise. First, there's Cloud9, which was signature to the Golduck line, but then added to the Licky Licky and Altaria lines, as well as Drampa. Kyogre then had the signature ability Drizzle, but this was later added to Politoed and Pelipper, and Groudon had the ability Drought, added later to the Ninetales line and Torkoal, as well as Mega Charizard Y. Huge Power was the signature ability of the Azumarill line, but this was later added to the Diggersby line and Mega Mawile. Marvel Scale was Melodic's signature ability, but it was added to Dratini and Dragonair later on. Plus and Minus are 2 abilities that are just worth talking about at the same time, being the signature abilities of Plusle and Minun, and they were later added to the Klinklang, Ampharos, and Manectric lines, along with the Dene and Toxtricity. The Ludicolo line then had Rain Dish, and this was added to a lot of Pokemon, such as the Blastoise line, Tentacruel line, Pelipper line, Shiinotic line, and Surskit. Rough Skin was the Sharpedo line signature ability, but this was later added to Druddigon and the Garchomp line. And Sandstream was Tyranitar's signature ability, later being added to the Hippowdon line and Gigalith. Shadow Tag was the signature ability of the Wobbuffet line, but it was later added to the Gothorita line and Mega Gengar. Stench was signature to the Muck line, but this has since been added to the Weezing and Skuntank line, the Garbodor line, and Gloom, but oddly not Oddish, Vileplume, or Blossom. Truant then is one you really think would be signature, being on Slacking and Slackoth, but it was actually also added to Durant. Then lastly, there's White Smoke on Torkoal, which was later added to Heatmor and the Centiskorch line. Moving on to Gen 4, you start to see some abilities that are really popular in the modern era of Pokemon. Among those that remain truly signature are Bad Dreams on Darkrai, Flower Gift on Cherrim, Multitype on Arceus, Normalize on the Delcatty line, and Stall on Sableye. Then there's quite a few that were later added to other Pokemon. The Porygon line had the Download ability, later added to Genesect. The Mr. Mime line had the Filter ability, later added to Mega Aggron and Revavroom. Bronzor and Bronzong had the Heatproof ability, later being added to Roly-Poly and the Sinistra line. Honey Gather was the signature ability of Combee, and for good reason, but it was later added to the Ribombee line and Teddiursa. Iron Fist was then a signature ability added to Hitmonchan in Generation 4, but then it was added to a ton of new Pokemon moving forward. Similarly, Klutz was on the Baniri line, but then added to all these Pokemon. Magic Guard was made to be the signature ability of the Clefable line, but it was later added to the Alakazam and Reuniclus lines, along with Sigilif. Motor Drive was made for Electivire, but was later added to the Zebstrika line and Emolga. Similarly, No Guard was made for the Machamp line, but was later added to the Golurk line, Karrablast, Honedge, Doublade, Mega Pidgeot, and Midnight Lycanroc. Poison Heal was made to be the signature ability of, you guessed it, the Shroomish line, and then was later added to Gliscor, who you probably thought it was for. Reckless was then made for Hitmonlee, and it was another one of those abilities that later got added to a bunch of other Pokemon. Skill Link was made for the Cloyster line, but was later added to the Ambipom, Cincino, and Toucanon lines, and Mega Heracross. Slow Start was made for Regigigas, which I can't believe they gave to another Pokemon, but they did. They gave it to Varoom, but luckily when it evolves, this gets erased. Snow Warning was made for the Abomasnow line, but was later added to the Aurorus and Alola Ninetales line, along with Vanillux. The Bibarel line got the ability Unaware, which was later added to all these Pokemon. And then finally, Unburden was actually the signature ability of the Drifblim line, later being added to all these Pokemon. And spoiler alert, but the Drifblim line actually gets another signature ability in Gen 5. It gets less and less common as we go through the series, but I really like it when they take a Pokemon from past generations and give them a new ability to further grow their identity and give you new things to love about them. So, in the same way, I'm excited to talk about today's sponsor, Raycon, who's bringing back the Everyday Earbuds Classic better than ever. Raycon makes wireless earbuds with premium feel and great audio quality for a fraction of the price of other brands. They come in a nice little case with lots of color options, and they even sell cool covers like this Galaxy one they sent me. I really like my Raycons. I actually had a pair a few years ago, and then I stupidly left them on a plane while traveling. For a replacement, I bought a more mainstream pair of earbuds to try them out, but honestly it just really made me miss my Raycons. I really love how comfortable they are in my ears, and how they don't get shaken around at all while I'm running, and the button controls are great. Like honestly, this was the thing I missed the most about them. These new Raycons now come with even more features that I love, like active noise cancelling and a pretty great awareness mode. Those alone make them pretty good for gaming on the go, but so does the 32-hour battery life in these things. So you can still use them for a long time and not have to charge them like every other night. So if you want to join in on great audio for a low price, go to buyraycon.com/pokethink to get a whopping 20% off a pair of everyday earbuds classic. Gen 5 then added a lot of signature abilities, but this time most of them actually remain signature. There's Defeatist on the Archon line, Flare Boost being added to the Drifblim line retroactively, Illusion on the Zoroark line, Imposter being added to Ditto, Mummy on the Kafagurgus line, Terravolt on Zekrom and Kyurem Black, Toxic Boost being added to Zangoose, Turbo Blaze on Reshiram and Kyurem White, Victory Star on Victini, and Zen Mode on Darmanitan. The only signature ability added in Gen 5 that was later added to other Pokemon was Iron Barbs on the Ferrothorn line, being added to Togedemaru in Gen 7. And now we'll move on to Gen 6. For those that remain signature to this day, there's Aura Break on Zygarde, Dark Aura on Yveltal, Desolate Land on Primal Groudon, Delta Stream on Mega Rayquaza, Fairy Aura on Xerneas, Gale Wings on the Talonflame line, Grass Pelt on the Gogoat line, Parental Bond on Mega Kangaskhan, Primordial Sea on Primal Kyogre, and Stance Change on Aegislash. Moving on to those that aren't signature anymore, Aroma Veil was made for the Aromatisse line, later being added to the Alchemy line, Doxbun, and the Oinkologne line. Bulletproof was made to be the signature hidden ability of the Chestnut line, later being added to the Komao line, the Double line, Applin, and Ursaluna. Then we have an interesting one, where Flower Veil and Symbiosis were made to be signature abilities for the Florges line. Flower Veil was later added to Comfey, and Symbiosis was later added to Oranguru. Fur Coat was made for Furfrou, but was later added to Alolan Persian. Gooey was made for the Goodra line, being added to the Wugtrio line. Refrigerate is an interesting one, being unique to the Aurorus line, but only for X and Y, because then Mega Glalie got it in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Then lastly, Sweet Veil was made for the Slurpuff line, later being added to the Rabombi, Serena, and Alchemy lines. Gen 7 then is another one of those generations with a ton of new signature abilities, but most of them remain signature to this day, but that also kind of has to do with how new those games are. So we'll start with all the ones that remain signature to this day. First there's Battle Bond on Greninja, Battery on Chargebug, Comatose on Komala, Dancer on Oricorio, Dazzling on Bruxish, Disguise on Mimikyu, Emergency Exit on Golisopod, Full Metal Body on Solgaleo, Galvanize on the Alolan Geodude line, Innards Out on Pyukumuku, Liquid Voice on the Popplio line, Long Reach on the Rowlet line, Merciless on the Toxapex line, Neuroforce on Ultra Necrozma and only Ultra Necrozma. So I think this is the first ability that the player can never actually use, which is cool. Power Construct on Zygarde, Power of Alchemy on the Alolan Muck line, Prism Armor on Necrozma, Queenly Majesty on Serena, Receiver on Passimian, Arceus System on Silvally, Schooling on Wishiwashi, Shadow Shield on Lunala, Shields Down on Minior, Soul Heart on Magearna, Steel Worker on Dhelmise, Surge Surfer on Alolan Raichu, Tingling Hair on the Alolan Dugtrio line, Triage on Comfey, Water Bubble on the Araquanid line, Water Compaction on the Palossand line, and Wimp Out on Wimpod. Whew, that's a lot. But luckily for my voice, there's only a couple abilities left for this generation. First there's Berserk for Drampa, but it was later added to Galarian Moltres. The Corrosion ability was given to the Salazzle line, but later the Glamora line as well. Electric Surge was Tapu Koko's signature ability, but now it's also on Pincurchin. The Beware line had the Fluffy ability, but now it's also on the Double and Houndstone lines. Tapu Bulu had Grassy Surge, later given to the Rillaboom line. Tapu Fini had Misty Surge, later given to Galarian Weezing, and Tapu Lele had Psychic Surge, later given to Indeedee. Stakeout was the signature ability of the Gumshoos line, but now it's also on the Thievul, Spidops, and Mabostiff lines. And Stamina was on the Mudsdale line, now also on Archaludon. Gen 8 then brings a lot of new signature abilities, but it actually doesn't have any that go on to be added to other Pokemon later on in the series. However, because of this generation's Pokédex cuts and the removal of Mega Evolutions, we've got a couple of old abilities that we're going to have to look at again and update. The first of these is Filter, which is back on the Cantonian Mr. Mime line since there's no more Mega Aggron. Then we've got Flower Veil on Comfey. There's no more Florges lying around, so Comfey's the only one to have it. Fur Coat used to be on Furfrou, but now it's on Alolan Persian. Magician is now only on Klefki since there's no more Hoopa or Delphox line. Mega Launcher is now only on the Cloetzer line since there's no more Mega Blastoise. Pixelate is now only on Sylveon since there's no more Mega Gardevoir or Mega Altaria. Protean is now only on Kecleon since there's no more Greninja line. Refrigerate is back to being the signature ability of the Aurorus line since there's no more Mega Glalie. Stakeout is now the signature ability of the Thievul line since there's no more Gumshoos line. And Symbiosis, which was also on Florges, is now only on Oranguru. It's also worth mentioning that the Guardian Deities were not included in Sword and Shield until the DLC, so their abilities became signature abilities for their counterparts, but just for a little bit. Then for our regular signature abilities, we've got a bunch of them. We've got As One on either of the Calyrex Rider forms, Ball Fetch on Yamper, Chilling Neigh on Glastrier, Cottondown on the Eldegoss line, Curious Medicine on Galarian Slowking, Dauntless Shield on Zamazenta, Dragon's Maw on Regidrago, Guerrilla Tactics on Galarian Darmanitan, Grim Neigh on Spectrier, Gulp Missile on Cramorant, Hunger Switch on Morpeko, Ice Face on Ice-Q, Ice Scales on the Frostmoth line, Intrepid Sword on Zacian, Libero on the Scorbunny line, Mimicry on Galarian Stunfisk, Mirror Armor on Corviknight, Neutralizing Gas on Coughing, Wheezing, and Galarian Weezing, Pastel Veil on the Galarian Rapidash line, Perish Body on Cursula, Power Spot on Stonejourner, Propeller Tail on the Barrascuda line, Punk Rock on Toxtricity, Quick Draw on Galarian Slowbro, Ripen on the Applin line, Sand Spit on the Sandaconda line, Screen Cleaner on Galarian Mr. Mime and Mr. Rhyme, Stalwart on the Duraludon line, Steam Engine on the Coalossal line, Steely Spirit on Berserker, Transistor on Regieleki, Unseen Fist on Urshifu, and Wandering Spirit on Galarian Yamask and Runerigus. And finally, we have the signature abilities for Gen 9, but before we get into them, we'll go over the ones that need to be updated due to dex cuts. First is Berserk, now only on Galarian Moltres since there's no Drampa in Gen 9. Download is back on the Porygon line after the removal of Genesect. The Toxicroak line ends up being the only one that can have the Dry Skin ability. Pincurchin is left with Electric Surge now that there's no more Guardian Deities. Revavroom is left with Filter after the removal of the Mr. Mime line. The Houndstone line now has Fluffy as its signature ability since there's no Beware or Double lines. The Hypno line ends up with the Forewarn ability now that there's no Musharna or Jinx lines. The Rillaboom line is left with Grassy Surge. The Azumarill line now has huge power to themselves again now that there's no more Mega Mawile or the Diggersby line. Misty Surge is back on Galarian Weezing, and Psychic Surge is back on Indeedee. Then Shadow Tag goes to the Gothorita line now that there's no more Wobbuffet or Mega Gengar. Then finally Numel is the only one that can have the ability Simple, and the Honchkrow line is the only one remaining that can have the ability Super Luck. Then from there, we'll finish this video off with some regular signature abilities. We've got Anger Shell on Cloth, Armor Tail on Farigiraf, Beads of Ruin on Chi-Yu, Commander on Tatsugiri, Co-Star on Flamigo, Embody Aspect on Ogerpon, Electromorphosis on Bellibolt, Good as Gold on Goldengo, Hadron Engine on Miraidon, Hospitality on the Poltergeist line, Lingering Aroma on Male Oinkalone, Mind's Eye on Blood Moon Ursaluna, Mycelium Might on the Toadscruel line, Opportunist on Espathra, Orichalcum Pulse on Coridon, Poison Puppeteer on Petrarunt, Purifying Salt on the Garganeckle line, Rocky Payload on Bombardier, Seed Sower on Arboliva, Super Sweet Syrup on Diplin and Hydrapple, Supreme Overlord on King Gambit, Sword of Ruin on Qian Pao, Tablets of Ruin on Wo Qian, Terra Shift on Terrapagos, Terra Shell on Terrestrial Form Terrapagos, Terraform Zero on Stellar Form Terrapagos, Thermal Exchange on the Baxcalibur line, Toxic Debris on the Glamora line, Vessel of Ruin on Ting Lu, Well-Baked Body on Doxbun, Wind Power on the Kilowattrel line, and Zero to Hero on Palafin. So that's the complete history of signature abilities in Pokemon. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and here's a special thanks to my YouTube channel members, Egg Kim, Kuego, and Halfling98. If you want to watch another one of my videos, check out my last one, where I went through Pokemon history to find every trainer that could be a gym leader.